For decades, the United States has been the dominant force in North American trade, energy supply, and manufacturing, particularly in the automotive and electric vehicle (EV) industries. However, Canada has just made a monumental move that is sending shockwaves through global markets. With new trade policies, strategic investments in energy independence, and a pivot towards international partnerships, Canada is breaking away from its traditional dependence on the US and redefining the rules of the game. This shift poses serious consequences for the United States. Could this be the beginning of the end for America's dominance in the auto industry? Will the US lose its grip on the EV race and energy trade? And most importantly, how will these changes impact consumers, businesses, and global trade dynamics? Canada's bold breakaway from U.S. trade control. For decades, Canada has been the U.S. largest trading partner, providing essential resources like crude oil, natural gas, and uranium that power American industries. In fact, nearly 60% of the crude oil imported by the U.S. comes from Canada, along with a significant portion of its natural gas supply. This relationship ensured energy security for both countries and created a sense of economic interdependence. However, tensions have been brewing. Increasing trade disputes, protectionist policies, and tariffs imposed by the U.S. have forced Canada to rethink its strategy. Instead of relying solely on the American market, Canada has aggressively expanded its trade partnerships with Europe and Asia. Recent trade agreements with Germany, Japan, and South Korea are paving the way for Canada to diversify its exports, ensuring that it is no longer dependent on a single market. This move is reshaping the economic landscape. By building infrastructure for LNG exports, expanding pipeline networks, and strengthening port facilities, Canada is securing its position as a global energy powerhouse. The U.S. can no longer assume that Canada's resources will always be available on demand. Consequences for the U.S. If Canada significantly reduces its oil and gas exports to the U.S., the impact will be felt immediately, sending shockwaves through multiple sectors of the economy. Gas prices could surge overnight, leading to higher costs for transportation, manufacturing, and everyday consumer goods. With fuel being a critical component of the supply chain, industries that rely on stable energy prices, such as aviation, logistics, agriculture, and heavy manufacturing, will struggle to maintain their operations without passing these costs on to consumers. Higher fuel prices will also lead to increased shipping and freight expenses, affecting everything from grocery store prices to online shopping deliveries. The airline industry, already dealing with fluctuating fuel costs, may see ticket prices rise sharply, making air travel more expensive for passengers. Small businesses that depend on affordable energy to keep their operations running may also feel the strain, leading to potential layoffs or reduced business hours. The supply chain crisis that began during the pandemic is still fresh in the minds of businesses and consumers, and another disruption could have long-term consequences. If Canada shifts its focus to new trade partners, the U.S. could face another wave of supply chain bottlenecks, this time fueled by energy shortages, inflation, and increased production costs. This could lead to broader economic instability, forcing policymakers to reconsider their energy strategies and seek alternative sources of oil and gas to prevent long-term economic fallout. The EV war. Electric vehicles represent the future of the automotive industry, and Canada is positioning itself as a leader in this space. The country is home to vast reserves of critical minerals like lithium, nickel, and cobalt, essential components for EV battery production. While American automakers, including Tesla, General Motors, and Ford, rely heavily on these materials, Canada is making a strategic shift. Instead of just supplying raw materials to the U.S., it is investing heavily in domestic EV battery production. The Canadian government has announced billions in funding for refining facilities, battery plants, and even its own EV production sector. Major automakers such as Volkswagen and Stellantis are already setting up large-scale facilities in Canada, recognizing its potential as a global EV hub. This move is a nightmare scenario for American automakers. If Canada prioritizes its own battery production and exports more materials to Europe and Asia, U.S. companies will be forced to rely on other suppliers, particularly China. This would make them vulnerable to supply chain disruptions, price fluctuations, and geopolitical tensions. U.S. tariffs backfire, and Canada wins. The U.S. has long used tariffs as a way to pressure its trade partners into compliance, but this time, the strategy is backfiring. In recent years, Washington has imposed heavy tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and EV battery materials, hoping to give American industries a competitive edge. However, instead of weakening Canada, these tariffs have forced it to become more self-sufficient. Canada has responded by investing in its own manufacturing capabilities, reducing reliance on U.S. supply chains, and forging stronger trade agreements with Europe and Asia. Instead of being economically dependent on the U.S., Canada is now emerging as a direct competitor. Canada's $300 billion master plan. Canada isn't just reacting to U.S. trade policies, it's proactively planning for long-term economic dominance. The Canadian government has unveiled a historic $300 billion investment strategy to modernize its economy, with a particular focus on energy, transportation, and trade infrastructure. The Gordie Howe International Bridge will allow Canada to export goods directly to the U.S. without relying on existing American-controlled infrastructure. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion will increase Canada's crude oil export capacity, making it less dependent on American refineries. Massive railway and port expansions will ensure that Canada can trade more efficiently with Europe and Asia. This level of investment isn't just about competing with the U.S., it's about reshaping global trade entirely. Canada's green energy revolution. While the U.S. struggles with political gridlock and outdated energy policies, Canada is emerging as a global leader in renewable energy. With billions being poured into wind, solar, and hydroelectric power, Canada is positioning itself as a green energy powerhouse. Over 60% of Canada's electricity already comes from hydroelectric dams, and the country is rapidly expanding its solar and wind energy sectors. Major investments from international companies are flowing into Canada, making it an attractive destination for sustainable energy production. Meanwhile, the U.S. remains heavily reliant on fossil fuels, with slow progress toward renewable energy adoption. If this trend continues, Canada could soon overtake the U.S. as North America's clean energy leader. Collapse of American manufacturing. Detroit has long been the heart of North American auto manufacturing, but Canada is quickly taking the lead. The combination of a booming EV industry, access to critical minerals, and strong trade agreements is turning Canada into an automotive powerhouse. Unlike the U.S., which depends on foreign imports for many essential components, Canada has a self-sustaining ecosystem for EV production. As global demand for electric vehicles grows, American automakers could find themselves struggling to compete with a rising Canadian industry. Is this the end of U.S. trade dominance? Canada is not just making changes, it is rewriting the economic playbook. By reducing its dependence on the U.S., investing in green energy, and dominating the EV sector, Canada is reshaping the future of North American trade. The big question is, can the U.S. keep up? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a historic shift in power? Subscribe for more updates on global economic shifts and major industry changes.